Good evening and welcome to the Italian Impact Podcast. I am your host, Steve Stefano Mancini. And as always, I want to welcome you to another episode. And unfortunately, my co-host and friend, Claudio, is a little under the weather. So I'm wishing him a swift recovery from a small bug and hope he's doing better. And Claudio, my friend, you are missed. But as they say, the show must go on. But interestingly enough, speaking of shows, have a great guest today. But before I get into Mr. DeLucia, I want to talk a little bit, just a reminder, if you're able to make it on October 18th, fundraiser at the Spino Club here in Pittsburgh. It'll be wonderful to see you there, meet you in person. Come on by. And if you hadn't had a chance to see the film Fedeltà, Soldier Prisoner, again, another international award has been given. So we are an international award-winning team that has produced what I think is an absolutely wonderful story about the prisoners that were kept in Chambersburg, PA. They have a lasting legacy 80 years later, and we are still talking about it. So it's a wonderful story. It's available on Amazon called Fedeltà, Soldier Prisoner, and hope you get a chance to view it. With that being said, I'm not one to have lengthy introductions, so I'm going to jump right into the guest because, truth be told, that's what you're here for. Even though my listeners all over the world are tuning in, I am very appreciative of that, but I know that you're not here for me, you're here for the guests. And with that being said, I have an absolutely fantastic guest, and I'm very excited to have gotten him on the show because we're going to talk about his book, which is a very intriguing plot, for lack of better terms. And with that being said, I want to welcome Mike DeLucia. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate being here. Thank you for the invite.
Oh, no, glad to do it. And Mike is an author and screenwriter, and I got to see some of Mike's work out there. We're going to talk about the book here in a little bit. But before we jump into what I like to jokingly say, what made you famous, is I like to know a little bit about the guests. And folks listening, or they want to know where you're from, where's your family from. We like to do that, just kind of call it just a little bit of a loosening up of the conversation, because I think, when you go right into, well, tell me about you, it's like you are, and I believe this, the result of a lot of decisions made that came before you and how you were raised. And that is a reflection on the work that you do now. So to me, it's always more than just an icebreaker. It's also about just getting to know the person. So tell me a little bit about you, where you're from, and what was family like growing up.
All right. I grew up in the Bronx, New York in the 60s and 70s and 80s. I grew up in a neighborhood, we were like Pelham Bay, Throgs Neck. I think we were closer to the Pelham Bay side, only because when I joined the Little League, I was in the Pelham Bay Little League, not the Throgs Neck Little League, and went to St. Benedict School, went to Monsignor Scanlon High School, so I had 12 years of Catholic schooling under my belt in the 60s and 70s, which comes along with all of the insanity that went on, in the classroom. I kind of like write about that in one of my books and screenplays called Being Brothers. Mom and dad, first generation Italian, so my grandparents had the accents. They were the ones who came here, those brave souls who left Italy, came here with pretty much nothing. And, they were the great generation, as my parents, the great generation. And, mom and dad, mom was a stay-at-home mom. She and dad worked like crazy. And as soon as we were old enough to hold a hammer or push a broom, he brought us on to work with him. He worked for the Department of Sanitation. We didn't work from there, but he used to dabble in real estate. He would buy buildings, usually in not the greatest or safest neighborhoods, and we would work with him there. And I guess that's a little bit of my upbringing. I went to, after high school, I wanted to become an actor, a movie actor. That was my big goal in life. And so went to college for a year, only because my father forced me to go, but I didn't want to go. And finally, I quit and went to HB Studio in Manhattan to study acting. Did that for a while, and that sort of set me off on my path. and that's pretty much, it was an Italian neighborhood, Italian Irish, neighborhood. Lots of great pizza, lots of great food.
What was the good Irish food?
There weren't any Irish restaurants that I know of, but mostly Italian places to eat.
I mean, I don't want to pick on the Irish, but I always wonder what is everyone's Italians got good food. I'm like, what is good Irish food? I don't mean that like in a mean way.
It's funny. I have a very good friend who he was actually my 7th grade teacher at St. Benedict's, and he's the one who introduced me to theater, and we remained friendly even after I left school, and we did I did a couple of shows over at St. Benedict's even after I graduated, and we remained friends. And I think I graduated college because I went back later in life. I became an English teacher in my 40s. 2000. Yeah, I was 45 when I started working as a teacher. And he took me out to dinner, and he said, all right, we're on a block and we're driving down the street, and he's like, okay, we have, there's a Thai place, and there's an Italian place, there's an Irish place. Not that the Irish are known for their culinary magic.
It's like the British. No one says, I can't wait to eat some British food.
Yeah, I've been to Ireland, and they have remarkably good dairy products, like their ice cream and lots of good soups and things like that. It's a whole different kind of food that Italians eat, but it is good.
Well, I was going to say that when you're in Europe, though, the biggest thing is because I get more in the small towns. I think the bigger cities are going away for it because I go back to Europe a lot, and the smaller towns, everything is fresh. It's still old fat, and I think it's almost like I can make anything and it's going to be good because it's fresh. Yeah.
I've recently started buying my pasta directly from Italy. Because the wheat is different, as I'm sure most people know. It's wheat, but it's a different variety of wheat, which is why when people with celiac disease and issues with with gluten go to Italy, they're fine, and it's just that we use a different kind of wheat here, and so I get my wheat direct from Italy, so it would probably cost 3 times more, but pasta's cheap. It's not like we're talking about lobster,
right.
So 3 times more. I'll pay 3 times more for a homegrown pasta that's in a small comes from a small town in in the south of Italy. Food in Italy and in Europe in general is far better. We just went to Iceland, actually.
Well, again, it's the preservatives is the key. They don't use their food isn't created in a laboratory. I mean, the notion that I can create food in a laboratory, there's nothing wrong here. I mean, I don't know. I just don't feel like that's what we're meant to ingest in our bodies.
Yeah, we're not. Our bodies are, the product of evolution that's been going on for millions of years. And, we're introducing ingredients into our systems and bodies. They don't know, the body doesn't know what to do with it. This is such a new thing. It doesn't know what to do with all the plastics and the chemicals and all the stuff that is brand new. When you talk about evolution and time, you're talking about the last couple of 100 years or 150 years, maybe that's more like it, maybe 150 years, where they started to introduce different things into food that weren't in there.
Definitely not from Mother Nature, that's for sure. Yeah. Now I want to talk about a little bit, go back to the growing up piece, because then I want to talk about that influence on your writing. So your family immigrated here. Was that before or after the Second World War?
It was before.
Okay. So they were from that generation that came over. Not that the ones that came over after the war weren't impoverished, because obviously after the war, Italy definitely had a poverty issue. But it was also, the world sort of went through a little bit of a boom because of the Reconstruction and, the funding in the Marshall Plan in Europe and rebuilding. And so, that ripple effect of strong economies. But before the war, they were escaping a lot of things, whether it was, fascism, whether it was poverty, When they came over here before the war, and you're growing up, were they of the generation that sort of said, "We're not Italians. You're going to be an American"?
Yeah, I mean, it was more of becoming American. My mother's grandmother, so I mean, she was older. Obviously, she never learned English. So my mom grew up bilingual because her grandmother lived with her, and she used to speak to my mother in Italian. My mother's mother spoke broken English. My grandfather, spoke English fairly well, but he had the accent. My grandmother, on my father's side, she wanted to become American, and she went to school to learn English, and my grandfather would talk to her in Italian, and she would answer him back in English. So my father didn't really he kind of understood Italian, but not like my mom. My mom, understands Italian, and if pushed, she can speak it. But it's been many years, so yeah, they were of that generation of let's become American, let's learn English and all.
So I got a strange question for you, and I was just thinking of this. If someone asked you, they said, "Tell me what an American is," how would you answer that? Because the reason I say this is very interesting. Everyone says they want to be, I hear that from a lot of people. A lot of immigrants, they want to be American. And I said, well, what do you mean by be American? I'm curious, what do you define that as?
Geez, that's such a deep and question. I don't even know that I'm kind of prepared to answer it. I mean, what is it to be an American? And it's all I've ever known, so it's difficult for me to really define it. All the basic stuff, freedom and all of that. But yeah, I mean, this is the only government, the only place I've ever known. So it's kind of difficult for me to say what's an American, other than the fact that it's the greatest place to live in the world, and it's free.
Amen to that.
Somebody posted something recently on Facebook, and it was a Middle Eastern person, so I'm assuming it was a Middle Eastern Christian, and he posted New York City, and there was a whole bunch of Muslims praying, right in the street. It was a big rally, and the person who was posting it said, it's great that people can do that here, because if a bunch of Christians were to do this in Iran or Iraq or Saudi Arabia and did this, it would be a very much different reception. So freedom, right?
Well, I think that's absolutely right, and I think that is the one thing that just blows my mind when people want to quote tear it down. It's like they don't know what they have, and a lot of people that feel that way have never lived in an oppressive regime. When you've lived in an oppressive regime, you understand more what freedom is. I was in the military for a lot of years. No, the military is not an oppressive regime, but your freedoms are stifled because you're not allowed to just do whatever you want, say whatever you want, dress the way you want, wear your hair any way you want. So you have a lot of limitations. And when you live like that, and then when you don't have those limitations, you're like, wow, I actually, little subtle small things that people don't even know that they have the freedom to do it. To your point, in certain countries, you can't dress a certain way. And, so we just I don't think people understand what they have. But then I would flip it back on you. And then I got a lot of Americans say, I'm Italian. And I say, well, to your point, they've never lived in Italy. They didn't grow up in Italian. They'll speak Italian. They say, I'm Italian. I'm Italian. Do they know what that means? Would if somebody asked you, what's an Italian mean, what would you say that meant? And again, you don't have to have the answer, Mike. It's just a rhetorical in a way.
Yeah, that's a really loaded question, because there's a lot.
That's what we do here, Mike, by the way. All curveballs.
Yeah. It's part of it's we grew up American, but our culture was very Italian.
Right.
We had our Sundays were different than our Irish friends, and it's funny. One of my good friends growing up was the opposite of me. His grandfather had the brogue, so they were of the Irish. My grandparents had the Italian, and and his grandfather used to say, the first taste of whiskey ever I had was with his grandfather. But he said, my grandfather would say on 2:00 on Sunday, he goes, let me see if I can get it. At 2:00 on Sunday, the Irish be drinking their Jamesons, and the Guineas be making their meatballs or something along those lines. So back then we had our traditions a lot more than today. Sundays were eat at 2:00. We had our our pasta, we had our meatballs, we had a different a dinner schedule, and how we celebrated holidays. So being Italian was a culture within our culture.
Right.
We were half the family is from the South and half the family's from the North. There was a split in my father's side of the family, and so we have relatives in Milan and Varese. But down south, in the Naples section, they used to, in Christmas, they used to do a village, presepias, under the tree. It wasn't, just a nativity set. It was like, so, out of all my friends, they all would have like nativity scene or like a train. We would have this, mountain my father would make out of rags and paper, and it'd have all like it was an Italian, it was like a village, not an Italian village. Obviously it was, reenactment of Jesus' birth, but it was very, very different than anybody else's. So to be an Italian, what is it to be Italian? There's the culture, within our culture. It's the best way I could put it, I guess.
No, and you can have that culture and still be an American. And I think that's what people forget, is they want to say, well, I have to be an American. But again, it is ultimately the culmination of a bunch of different cultures, which does not prohibit you from, remembering and honoring your culture. It just means that there's a certain underlying thing that makes you American. And I do ultimately agree that freedom is a big part of that underlying element. It's what's an American. It's someone who is free. And I think what a lot of people lose is, and this is where I think the challenge comes, is they don't know they're free. And until they lose it, they're not going to know what they had. And that's what scares me. That's why they say every so many years, where they say the tree of liberty must be refreshed with the blood of patriots, because people forget what it means to have liberties, and they too willingly give them up in the name of security. And it's a generational. Every so many generations, we've got to relearn these lessons. Mike, I'm going to be right back, because I want to talk about how all of this influences your writing, both the book and the screenwriting. So we'll be right back after this.
Ciao, Chrissy. Your Italian got so much better. Brava.
Grazie. It's because I learned the best way possible.
How so?
Well, I learned that with apps, grammar books, and even YouTube videos, I could only get so far. I had to immerse myself. I noticed I did best when I was in Italy visiting family. That's where my level really soared.
And wow, did it work?
Thanks. I became much more confident, fast. That's why I created Footsteps Through Time. It's an Italian language experience. You don't just take Italian classes, you immerse yourself in a real Italian village. With lots of fun activities and excursions, it's life-changing.
I see. So, no more boring grammar, impersonal apps, just real conversations, real culture, and delicious food, of course.
Exactly. I'm so excited about this. Learn Italian by actually becoming part of the local community for a week and living it. So if you've been dreaming of Italy and the language, check out Footsteps Through Time in Italy.com. Book now and join the experience.
Andiamo!
Thanks to Greater Pittsburgh Travel. For any of your travel needs, let Tom and the team at Greater Pittsburgh Travel know, and they'll take care of you. For more information, call 412-331-2244 or visit their website at www.greaterpittsburghtravel.com. Did your parents or grandparents ever talk about the Vietnam War? The Hardest Year, A Love Story and Letters During the Vietnam War, is an accurate portrayal of what life was like during the 1960s, a time of the draft, equal rights, and the anti-war movement. Follow newlyweds through their letters as they navigate 1 year of the war an ocean apart. The Hardest Year by Carol and William Wagner is available now wherever books are sold. And we want to thank the Calabria Club of Pittsburgh If you're interested in learning more, you can find their contact information on Facebook at Calabria Club of Pittsburgh. Again, thanks Domenica and the team at the Calabria Club of Pittsburgh for your support. And we want to thank La Scuola d'Italia Galileo Galilei, the only nonprofit school in Pittsburgh endorsed by the Italian Consulate. If you're interested in learning Italian or have your children being immersed in the Italian culture and language, be sure to give them a call at 412-404-7070. And that's La Scuola d'Italia Galileo Galilei. We'd also like to thank Chris Gonzalez from the Knights of Columbus. If you have any questions about joining the Knights of Columbus, reach out to Chris Gonzalez at 412-605-9074. All right, welcome back. My guest today is Mike DeLucia, who is an author and screenwriter, great guy. And Mike, we kind of started talking about, what's an Italian, what's an American. And as you alluded to, you had your different influences growing up. Primarily, it sounds like Italian, but others based on the neighborhood you were in. But like everything, who we are is a reflection of our experiences. So you dabbled in, in acting, and then you went on and you taught English. But let's talk about the writing and the screenwriting. Talk about what started you on that path, and let's talk about some of your works.
All right. Well, it was in my blood. It was my dream to become a movie actor. It's really, really what I wanted to do. It fueled me in every possible way that a dream does fuel somebody. Some people, as I've grown older, I've realized that we all have dreams. It's unfortunate when you have the dream of success in something like being in a band, or being a famous singer, or being, a Major League Baseball player, or being an actor or a screenwriter. It's a different kind of a dream. It's a dream that it never leaves you. It burns inside of you, but it's so difficult to attain because it's based on luck. And, my son is different. He doesn't have that kind of dream. His dream is to just have his family and to provide for them, and to, everything is based on his family and going on vacation and providing for his kids and going. For me, there was always this nagging thing to just, want to excel, in the entertainment business, despite all the other things that I wanted to be successful at. And I say it's based on luck. I used to say it's a combination of luck and talent, and you need the talent when the luck comes. But I've learned at this point in my life that that's not true at all. It is 100% luck. It's not like being a baseball player. Being a baseball player, it's different. You've got a skill that only very, very few people have. But I've seen some really, really, bad acting in professional, whether it be, theater or films or TV. I've seen, bad writing. I think that luck is there, and then the geniuses who happen to be lucky, they're the ones who really excel in their fields. But if somebody didn't believe in them, if they weren't in the right place at the right time, the Al Pacinos of the world, the De Niros of the world, the Morgan Freemans of the world, Meryl Streeps, and so on and so forth, they would have been something else. They were just lucky. They were lucky that they were in the right place at the right time. The right person saw them on that day at that time. Again, it's a matter of luck.
But they had to be prepared. About a month or so ago, we had Ray Boom Boom Mancini on, and he talked exactly about this. And he made a comment, something to the effect that, there's some guys in the gym that are absolutely fantastic boxers, but they'll never get to the next level. And he sort of attributed, if I'm, kind of paraphrasing, but basically, came to the exposure, say through a good manager or something. But I think you nailed it. Because I've always said that. I see a lot of what I'll call superstars that I don't think are very talented. And I see a lot of, so for example, I'll just use on a superficial level, good looks. I see a lot of, actors and actresses, I say, well, they're not that good looking. And I see somebody that's a nobody, quote, nobody, that's much better looking. And then when I see the person act, I say, well, this isn't exactly knocking my socks off. So what was it, to your point now, that someone saw in them and said, oh, that's my guy or gal, and they're going to be a superstar. And then here's someone over here that it's probably better, and they're not getting it. And I think you nailed it. I do believe it's all luck, but you do got to be ready if Lady Luck shines on you.
Yeah, I mean, ready is. I mean, if you're trying to become an actor, right? Of course, you're ready to act. Doesn't mean you're good. It just means, maybe somebody, because you could approach people. Let's just say about, we'll take, to make movies, to create a movie these days. You need funding on the independent level. Let's just say, you could have a great product, and just not meet the person at the right time. You might talk to somebody who's worth $1 billion, but they're just not ready, or it's not the project, or maybe you see that person 10 years and it's a different story. Maybe it's a better day, maybe it's a better time, maybe they've changed, and you happen to be the person who walks in front of them at that moment and says, "Hey, I need funding for this," and they're like, "Yeah, let's do it." As an actor, you might look like somebody who, while I was writing this, I was thinking of something. You look just like, you might not be the best, but there's something about your look that I really like. And there's a show out now called Outlander. And, I've studied acting my whole life. I directed shows in my school, and I've directed little, film things. There's one actress on Outlander that I've coached better actors in my high school play productions. She's awful, and I say to myself, how did she make it? Is it a favor? Did her parents know somebody? Did they like her look? What is it? Why did she get that part? It happens to come down to luck. That's it. I know so many brilliant actors and musicians and songwriters that you'll never know of, you'll never hear. Doesn't mean that they're not phenomenal. It just means that they just weren't lucky enough. Like I said, it's luck, and within that field of luck, the superstars emerge because those people, are just brilliant, and they just happen to have been lucky. Somebody liked them, So yeah, I really, at this point in my life, feel as though, I'm sure you've seen movies and you said, God, that was terrible.
I've seen too many. And the worst part is I've seen movies that are hits making a lot of money. And I'm going, this is insane. This is the dumbest thing I've seen. And yet there it is. And somebody had to, but you know what? It's funny because somebody had to watch that in post-production. And you're wondering, what were you thinking? Or was it just too late?
Yeah. Actors on TV, I sometimes I turn to my wife and I'm like, wow, that person's doing a lot of acting. Like, in other words, it shouldn't look like acting. Yeah. You should be fooled into thinking you're watching real life. That's what good acting is, where you're absolutely get taken to this world, you get taken to this place where you think that you're watching something that's happening. If somebody's acting is pulling my focus, is making me think this is so fake, and yet that person was selected among, hundreds of people, perhaps. Again, was it a favor? Was it they just looked the part? I don't know. I call it luck.
So let's talk about your screenwriting then, because like you said, you've been writing and you've written books, so you're successure in your own right.
Yeah, I
don't think about it, Mike.
The glass ceiling.
Right.
I've won, a lot of awards. I won the literary award for Sons and Daughters of Italy for the state of New York. I won that award last year. My books have won over 25 awards. Each one of my screenplays that I've written, each one of them had people. I've gotten so close. For Being Brothers, I literally had an entire production team, and we were we had everything in place. The only thing we didn't have was the money, and we wined and dined, and we, had meetings with billionaire Italians, because that's really where, my thing is this, and I'm not sure if you know it or not. Everything I write has an Italian protagonist. There's always Italian in it, because I am just so sick and tired is not the right. I'm so disgusted by the way Hollywood has brainwashed the entire world into thinking that Italians are either criminals or an unrefined, uneducated people. Italians have contributed more to society than any other ethnicity, and I would debate anybody to what we have given to this world in every aspect that frames society. In physicists and doctors and inventors and architects and artists and athletes, in everything, Italians have just excelled, and yet Hollywood refuses to demonstrate Italians like that, and they have brainwashed the world. They will only show us in that way. You take a film like Green Book, wins an Academy Award. Here we have the Italian thug, who his English is being corrected by the guy he works for. He throws litter out the window. He's the gun-toting tough guy with the heart, and in the end he starts off as a racist, and in the end he brings the black man into his family, and so on and so forth. And it's a true story, and things like that happen. Yeah, but the issue, and I don't even have issues with mafia, organized, crime stories, and some of the greatest films ever made, masterpieces were, mafia movies. I mean, look The Godfather and, Goodfellas and so on and so forth, Bronx Tale. But that's all they'll show us as.
Right.
That's it. They will not give us our due. You think that they would ever have an Italian in a movie, the president with an Italian last name? Never. They would never do that. Where do you ever see the Italian as the thinker in the room, as the smart person? You don't. TV has been a little bit kinder than movies. I have seen some educated characters, on some TV shows, that have Italian names, and I applaud the few that they do. My thing is I want to show Italians as we actually are, and I want to put out a movie a year, 2 movies a year, just showing Italians as people, period. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take years of producing major films that feature Italians as we actually are and not the stereotype, for people to start realizing how ridiculous this caricature is of Italians, how this stereotype is ridiculous.
But you know what?
And so, my thing is always going to the Italian community. There are so many successful Italians who can fund, independent movies. And so far I have not gotten there. So far I have not, gotten the funding that I've needed, even though I've had everything else in place. So it's been, disappointing, because I feel as though, very wealthy Italians, I tell them, you're not investing in a movie. You're investing in our reputation. You're investing in your people. You're investing in the reputation of your parents, your grandparents, and the reputation of your children and grandchildren. This isn't about money.
Right.
It's about an investment in our culture.
Well, I want to say real quick, I want to jump in there because, 2 things. One, I'll give you a perfect example. This is Italian American Heritage Month, October. Nobody knows that. but you know everyone else's Heritage Month. Now, again, I'm not for or against, quote, Heritage Months, but I have this philosophy: if you want to celebrate people, you either celebrate everyone or you celebrate no one. It's not right to pick and choose. So here in Pittsburgh, to your point, which was major contributions, I mean major contributions by the Italian American community, and there's nothing here for the month, but yet, the City Hall, there's the, Happy Hispanic Heritage Month, which is fine, but where's the Italian Heritage Month sign? Nothing. And so to your point is, this is why. People say, why do you do this? This is why. We are literally the kind of last bastion of group, you will, that can just basically get crapped on, and nobody cares, nobody says anything. But I want to go back to your mafia movies point, though. See, therein, I think I agree with you in the sense that they're movie classics. The Godfather is it's a great movie. I'm not going to lie, and everyone, it's a very romantic notion, of the gangster life. But then you watch the real, you read about the real guys, they're just brutal thugs. In some cases, they're just psychotics. They were murderers. They weren't nice guys in any way, shape, or form. Now, with that being said, though, the problem is when you make a great movie like that is this romantic notion, what happens, though, is everyone wants to duplicate that. They want to be, the Italian Don or a Goodfellas, where, it's kind of almost comical, the way these guys are, quote, just whacking people for this or that. The overlay, the narration is, it's fantastic. But I think the problem is when you do it that well, everybody wants to duplicate it. And that's why I don't think you, to your point, you kind of take away from a regular movie now. Because now I'm saying, hey, listen, look at some of the great movies. What were they about? Okay, got it. I want to duplicate that. And I think that perpetuates the stereotype. The problem is they did it so well. And it's kind of like a victim of your own success now.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of Italian artists doing their absolute best work all in one place, and that's what has triggered this. We're so good at what we do that it created this genre. But again, I don't mind it, but I do mind the fact, and it is a fact, that that's all they'll show us as. That's all they will present Italians as, as the carpenters, as the plumbers, the uneducated, and there's, again, my father, was that. There's nothing wrong with that. They're noble professions, but that's not all we are.
Right.
We are, growing up, our dentist was Italian, our lawyer was Italian, our accountant was Italian, so Italians are everything. And my father used to say when I was a kid, the reason why Italians are great at everything is they put their heart into everything that they do. Now, it might be just a saying of a proud Italian, and I don't know why, but, go to Italy, see, and just look at what our ancestors have built, the magnificence of what it is to be Italian. And instead of being celebrated, to me, we're insulted. And I take great offense to it.
Well, I agree with you. I do think that passion, that the cultural landmark of Italians, there are certain cultural things that we do, and I do think passion is one of them. And I think when you're passionate about anything you do, I do think you're going to be better at it, more successful. Now, Mike, before we go, we're running out of time. I do want to talk about your book, Time Passages, Echoes of Troy. What was the inspiration with that? Let's talk about that book real quick.
Okay. It's my latest. It's how all of my books, come about. Being Brothers was actually semi-autobiographical. So that one, and Madness about, the basketball player that no one knows, Hank Luisetti, son of Italian immigrants, who absolutely revolutionized basketball. And I wish I could talk more about him and what he did, for the sport. But other than that, Born for the Game, time passes. It's just ideas that I had. I think I was watching a medieval, movie. It might have been Braveheart, and I'm looking at the brutality of those battles and how people just get in and they're fighting and they're getting cut down and so on and so forth. And I thought, wow, what would a modern warrior be like if you were to go back in time and be placed in one of those battles? One man could wipe out an entire army, and with the weaponry that we have. And I would just, these are things that I think of in my, while I'm going to sleep at night. I drift off thinking of stories. I enjoy them, and I this thing over and over and over in my mind. And when I was ready to write my next, story, my next book, I had a whole bunch of stories because, that just have these little scenes that I just think of. And from that I build, and then, this Navy SEAL, basically it's about a Navy SEAL who's injected with experimental DNA. It's very new. Even the president just learns about it. There's a big backstory behind that, and he goes back in time accidentally, and he winds up in ancient Troy, years before the Odyssey. Homer's the Odyssey, the Iliad, and they're on the brink of war. And here's this modern soldier with modern weapons in this place, and he happens to be Italian. His name is Alfred Brodini. He's called Brody, and it's a really, really good story. The feedback has been really, really phenomenal. It's a love story, so there's romance, there's war, there's intrigue, there's all kinds of stuff going on. There's political stuff happening, and I when I taught English, I taught the Odyssey, and so I learned a lot about Greek mythology. So that's all embedded into the story as well. Not that I have monsters. I don't have any, monsters happening. There's no, three-headed dogs or, anything like that. But all of the gods are kind of talked about and so on and so forth. So it's very big. A lot of people have said, this should be, a cable series. So I'm working on that right now. I hired a company recently, this week actually, last week, and they are going to create a movie trailer for me using 100% AI. So I wrote the storyboard for it. So all of the actors and everything in it will all be generated through AI, because that's the only way it could be affordable. To make a 3-minute movie trailer using hiring actors and getting permits and hiring crews and cameras and editing be $75,000, $100,000 to create a real professional, movie trailer.
I've been there, Mike. I've been there. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, it's not a couple of people in a room, which would be expensive too. But this is, you're talking about sea battles and catapults, and it's a lot of big, it's huge.
A lot of set
development. So I'm able to do it. I'm able to do that, and then from there, I'm going to look for the right agent or manager or attorney to try and get it to the vast amount of networks that are out there, and hopefully to turn this book into a series. And that's the goal, and hopefully we can, and it does, and we get an Italian protagonist out there who's everyone's rooting for.
Mike,
and what? He's not a criminal, and he's actually a good person, and he's not, he's educated, and
So you don't have to talk. You don't have to cast me as the head guy, but I'll be looking for some sort of call for an extra at least. So we're going to talk about that. Mike, before I let you go though, where can folks find the book?
Please, I ask all of you, go to Amazon.com. Everyone's got an Amazon account, and it's called Time Passages, Echoes of Troy. Or you can just put, Mike DeLucia, author, and my books will pop. All of them will come up. Or you can go to booksbymikedelucia.com. these kinds of things are what, fuel indie writers like myself. I don't have a whole, publishing company going out there and promoting for me. This is all me. So podcasts and people supporting for whatever reason, whether you like to read or whether you, want to support an Italian writer, I ask you to go out there and to get it and to recommend it and to give it as gifts to people, give the gift of a book. So, and hopefully we'll see it up on the screen one day.
And I'll put that link down in the description. So just go click on that link and go out there and support Mike and all his work. And again, he's trying to spread a positive message of Italian Americans. Again, I appreciate a good gangster movie too, but I think we're more than gangsters. Mike, I want to thank you again for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. And obviously, I wish you the best of luck. I'm looking forward to actually reading the book. It actually does look very interesting, and the reviews have been very good. So I'm actually very excited about this one. So again, Mike, any final thoughts?
No. That's really kind of it, and actually, yes. Now that you
glad to do it, Mike. Glad to do it.
If anyone out there knows anybody who would say, who would like to support, maybe get some investors involved. The only way it's going to happen, it's not going to happen by talking about it. Talking is cheap. It's going to happen by Italians helping Italians, because that's kind of like what I'm looking for. I'm looking for support to say, hey, I want to back this movie. Time Passages is way beyond. I'm talking more about a smaller film like Being Brothers, about an Italian family growing up in the Bronx in the 70s, something that's manageable. So if anybody knows anybody, or if you're that person yourself and you're part of a group of people and say, hey, we can kind of get things going, to make this happen, God, please reach out.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. Again, folks, let's support each other. Let's support the community. A link down in the description. Click on it. Go support Mike. Buy his book. And if nothing else, you're going to be happily entertained with a good story. So, Mike, thank you again very much. Thanks, my listeners all over the world. I appreciate you all taking time out of your busy schedule. And God willing, I'll see you in a week. In the meantime, you have a wonderful and blessed week.